Hi guys, I'm Joe the Multiboxer, and I'm going to take you through some more ISBoxer 2 module development. This time we're going to develop some in-game graphical user interface, that's GUI, and we're going to learn how to do that following this guide. So it does explain that module development will typically be done by developers. So if you don't feel like you're a developer, you're not interested in any sort of code, you probably will not want to follow this guide. You'd rather download the module later on. So this is it's a written guide. It looks fairly long, but it's got a lot of code and images that take up a lot of space in here. So let's get busy. This is what we're going to build right here. So this is the toggles from the core module, and this is what we're going to use. This is an image that I made for this video, and don't mind the Microsoft Paint. That's just a little mouse figure um, added to this little image here. So we're going to add that picture when broadcasting is on, and we're going to light it up if hotkeys are on. It's simple enough. So the next thing to do is create a new module, and I'm going to name it Mirai Toggles following the video. It uses Mirai's name because I made this to demonstrate for Mirai how to do what he suggested might be a way that he would like it to work for the toggles. So let's go ahead and create the module through here, Mirai Toggles, and the abbreviation MRT that it automatically filled in based on the name, that's going to be important later on. As this explains, part of what we do later on refers to ISBoxer or ISB2_MRT and other things, and that's where the abbreviation MRT comes from. So we're going to just complete that, and then we'll open the folder. And I've got a couple of images for what we're going to do, and I'm just going to copy those right into the module folder. So we've got that, and we're going to open it in Visual Studio Code. So most of this guide is going to be about creating in-game GUI using LavishGUI 2. So we're going to do almost all of the work in the lgui2 package file, and we will open that now. So as this says, here's what's in the file by default. There it is. This file is in JSON format, so the curly braces on the outside means that it describes one object. That's an object that will be read by LavishGUI 2. So on the inside, there's a list of named properties. Right now, there's only this schema. What the schema thing is, this is a special property that tells an editor, such as Visual Studio Code, what to expect inside this object. And this identifies that it's a LavishGUI 2 package. And so Visual Studio Code will kind of know what we're doing as we start adding to the object. So let's start adding. We're going to be adding an element so that we can have a window. So elements is a list of objects. So add in our first object here. And the first thing we need to do is tell LavishGUI 2 what type of element this is. So it's a window. And as we start typing in, it sort of has some suggestions, common things, and it knows about lots of different element types, but we are going to use window. So then we can add other things to the window. There's lots of things we can play with, but we need to do some specific things. So let's follow the guide. Yada yada, we are down here. So we can refer to the documentation. The element documentation here has a list of properties and other things that can go, list of events and styles and lots of things. And at the bottom here, it's got a example of a window. So if you wanted to follow some examples, there's examples available in documentation. So this metadata section tells us something that can be important for ISBoxer 2. So all properties that begin with an underscore are placed in the elements metadata table, and that's mentioned here in the guide. So It says that we can mark our window as being an ISBoxer 2 window by providing a specific metadata item. And that'll help us later on do things like turn off all the title bars on all ISBoxer 2 windows. I'm not covering that, how to do that in this guide. There'll just be a way to do it sort of like you do with ISBoxer 1 later on. And it will use this tag in order to do that. So let's go ahead and make an ISBoxer 2 metadata, and we're going to set it to true as it says here in the guide. And while we're doing homework, our element should have a name. It's not required, but we can call our window mrt.toggles, and now later on, if we wanted to hide specifically this window's title bar, for example, we could refer to the window as mrt.toggles. So now we've got exactly what's in here. And we can test our window in game already by loading the module and launching our window. But let's add some content to it. So this example uses hello world, and as it explains, we can use text string as content, and LGUI2 will automatically turn it into a text block element. So let's have a look at that. Content hello world. And as you can see, that's basically what we're going to look at when we launch this. So we will go in here, we'll load both core and Mirai toggles, and launch dx-nothing. So there it is. There's our hello world, and there's the toggles. So lined up to that, it's the same thing. So this is from the core module, and we're going to make a different version of toggles. Okay, so we actually want to use an image as our content. LavishGUI2 provides an image box element for us to use. So that documentation is, I guess I didn't open it. Here we go. So here's the image box element, and it has a example here that you can follow. And this explains a little bit of what's important for creating an image box right here. So let's start by replacing our hello world with an empty object. So instead of this string, we're going to have an empty object, and this is going to define a element for us. So we're going to make that the type image box. And the important bit of an image box element is going to be the image brush. This is a brush object which is used to paint something, so to speak. So here's a bit about image brushes, or brushes, not just image brushes, but so that's what the image brush is going to be about. Image brush. So this typically involves a color and or an image file. If an image file is specified, the color is blended with the image. It's also helpful to note the default color is solid black. So if you don't want your image blended with solid black and therefore appearing solid black, you should also specify the color as not being black. Color, we're going to use white, which when you put in color, it knows that it can be an object or an array. And if you use an object, you can specify the color separately by name, alpha level, and so on. But we're going to use an array just to keep it more compact. And in an array, you can provide 4 numbers or 3 numbers. And if you provide 4, then it's going to be alpha, red, green, blue. If you provide 3, it'll just be red, green, blue. So there's 2 different ways your numbers can be in here. They can be integers from 0 to 255. So this would be full white. Or they can be decimals. So they can be 1.0, 1.0, 1.0. And that means 100%. So it could go to from 0.0 to 1.0 is the range for that. So this is the simplest way to specify solid white. So that's full red, full green, full blue, and when you combine those, it's white. So next we go image file, and we're going to use base.png, and that's just the file that is right there in the folder base.png. Okay, so there is exactly what it shows under the content. and it shows it loaded in game. So we can save that, and we could launch DX nothing again. There it is. There's our image box, and there's the old the core modules or the core toggles that we're going to replace. So that does nothing yet other than show up just like that. So now we want it to fade out a bit and kind of darken a little if hotkeys are turned off, fade back in if hotkeys are enabled, and we want to switch in an alternate image, which we've got the icon here, repeater on. It's loading this whole thing. Anyway, we've got that file, and we can use that. So this says that LGUI2 will handle most of these things using styles. So we can open the documentation there. Style is basically a list of properties that we're going to change together. So each element can have as many different styles as it needs. For our needs, we're going to need 4 styles, one for hotkeys on, hotkeys off, broadcasting on, and broadcasting off. That's 4. So what we're going to do, the hotkey styles are going to alter the opacity property, which is part of any element. So if we go back here and look in the list, opacity, usually a number between 0.0 and 1.0, with 1.0 being 100% opaque and 0 being transparent. So for each of these things that we're doing, you can refer back to the documentation for exactly the information on it. So the hotkeys are going to change the opacity of the image, and broadcasting will change the actual image brush. So styles go in an object named styles and will be activated based on their name. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to add those right to the image box. And while we're on that, the opacity, we can add an opacity line directly to the image so that its state is basically starting with hotkeys off and broadcast off already applied. So I will add that real quick, opacity, because we're going to lower that when hotkeys are off, and we're going to say that hotkeys are off when this window loads. So styles, oops, and we're going to make our styles called hotkeys on, hotkeys off, broadcast on, and broadcast off. And each of those is an object. That thing keeps popping. Okay, so we've got those. And then each of those, we're going to change the opacity in the hotkeys, and we're going to change the image brush and styles. So we've already got examples right here of what these are going to be. So broadcast off is going to be exactly a copy of that, and hotkeys off is going to be an exact copy of this. And then obviously all we need to do is adjust that value in hotkeys on. So we're going to set it to full opacity. And then in broadcast on, we copy that. And this is going to use repeateron.png instead of base.png. Repeater on. So there we go. So we've got these 4 styles. They don't automatically apply or anything. It's just these are the names, and this is what they're going to do. So in order to test that, we want to be able to activate these styles when hotkeys are turned on and off, or broadcasting is turned on and off. So LGUI2 provides a triggers system which allows the GUI to react to LavishScript conditions. So while we're not going to go into a whole lot of detail with LavishScript in this tutorial, it does provide exactly what you're going to copy and paste into something like this for the triggers. Now these will be provided on the ISBoxer 2 wiki later on, as part of the reference for the API for doing things like this. But right now, I'm just giving those to you as part of this video. So, the trigger system, you're going to need these things to paste in. Similar to how styles are set up, we have a triggers object with named trigger definitions inside. The name of each trigger is not particularly important here, but should be unique for each trigger. So similar to styles, it's going to look somewhat the same, feel somewhat the same. Each trigger will specify its condition along with an event handler, more documentation, called matched to do when the trigger is matched, and optionally an unmatched event handler as well. So an event handler, we can look at some of the things that event handlers can do. They can do some LavishScript. They can send the event to another element. You can change the style. We're going to activate an element or a style. That's what we're going to do. There's also animation. You can activate an animation or kick off a task. So there's different things that you can do when events fire. LavishGUI 2 events fire. So we're going to have a matched event that's going to kick off the style, and we're going to have an unmatched event that kicks off the other style. So we'll go further into event handlers later on, but for now we're just going to have it apply styles to itself, and that's done by specifying the type of style and providing style name. So after these styles, we add an object called triggers. And that is indeed an object. So inside here we need, we're going to use two different triggers, one for hotkeys and one for broadcasting, and then each of those will have an unmatched and matched condition. So for event handlers for the condition. So first we're going to do broadcast and then hotkeys. And the first things we're going to do, it recognizes that something's missing from these new objects, so it knows that match is going to be coming up eventually. So, but first we're going to start with the condition. So you need to paste in these conditions here. So here's the one for broadcasting, and we'll go ahead and do the one for hotkeys as well. So now we've got the conditions for both, and we just need to fill in the matched and the unmatched event handlers for these. Copy and paste that down here real quick. Okay, so these event handlers, as it explains, these need a type style and provide a style name. So as we fill this in, it's recognizing a little bit about what goes in here. Again, it knows the animation and other types of event handlers. We're going to use style, and then it knows style name is one of the options here. So we're going to, when broadcasting toggle state matches, broadcast is on. Broadcast on. And then we're going to do something similar below it. In the unmatched, we're going to use broadcast off style. So that's all for the broadcasting toggle state. We can make this a little prettier here. And here we're going to do the hotkeys. Same thing, just with hotkeys. Style, type, style, style name, hotkeys on. Again, we can copy and paste to speed things up. Hotkeys off. All right, there we go. That's the triggers. So at this point, we have a working indicator system, which we can use the core module's toggle buttons to actually change the states. So clicking buttons on the core module's toggles also changes our GUI thanks to the triggers and styles. So let's go ahead and test that out. Launch. All right, so there's that. So now if we click these, then the image changes, lights up, as that's kind of how the idea works. But clicking on this does nothing. So that's what we're going to look at next. So finally, we can make our GUI respond to clicks. The idea is for left click to toggle hotkeys and right click to toggle broadcasting. To make this happen, we're going to need an event handler with custom handling when a click happens on our image box. So that way we can do different things if it's left or right click, and so on. So lgbtq provides an event called OnMouseButtonMove on all elements, which fires anytime a mouse button is pressed or released on that element. We can add an event handler with a specific name, OnMouseButtonMove, which LavishGUI2 uses for any element and is listed here. So OnMouseButtonMove, mouse button is moved while over this element. So we'll go back to the guide. So this time we're going to have to add a method in LavishScript and have our handler use that method. So this time we're going to add our event handler inside an event handler's object, and this time it's going to use a method type for the event handler. So let's start doing that. Event handlers, and it's OnMouseButtonMove, like so. And that's an object, and again, give it the type method, and it requires an object and a method. The object name comes from our module abbreviation, and in this case it'll be ISB2_MRT. The method name we make up, but it needs to follow some pretty common rules for naming things in code. So it starts with an alpha, some letter, or an underscore, and it can contain alphanumerics and underscores, but it cannot have white space, it can't start with the number, and so on. So we're just going to call it onToggleClick. It's not that hard to make something up like that. So type method, whoops, and the method we're made up is onToggleClick, and the object is ISB2MRT, and again that comes from the abbreviation from our module and it's used all over in these files. So OnMouseButtonMove, that's going to use the onToggleClick. So that's done. There's nothing else we have to do right now in this file. But in order for this to do anything, we need to do some LavishScript. So that's going to be in the mrt.controller.iss. So this is the LavishScript controller file for this module. So again, we're not going to cover LavishScript too much in depth, but we're going to cover what the basics are. So we've got an object def, which stands for an object definition, and it says here's the MRT controller, which inherits the ISBoxer 2 module controller. It's got a initialize method, which is pretty much empty, a shutdown, some basic comments, nothing important, and it's got an example of a task that produces some output. The task does nothing other than show some debugging output to help you understand what's going on if you're creating a task. So it explains next that typically LavishScript methods will take parameters as part of the method definition inside the parentheses here. But LavishGUI2 event handlers use an alternate method to provide direct access to various objects that it has available in context. So it provides an object called context. The context will include a JSON object called args with details about the event, including the name of the control that's pressed or released, and of course the position of the control. So we know those things now, but we don't know what they look like, how to access them. So let's start by peeking at that, and it gives this code to start with for onToggleClick. So we'll paste that in here. And this is going to look basically like this image here. Pretty it up. There you go. So that's that. There's the onToggleClick method. And so when you load this up and you open up the in-game interspace console, it'll output something that looks like this. So we can do that. Open up dx_nothing. Stretch that out a bit so you can see it. and open up the in-game interspace console with the tilde key. Clear that out for you. All right, so when you left click on this, it produces some output. And then when you right click on it, it produces some more output. And you can adjust this and see exactly the 4 events that get fired. So this was the left click, here was the right click. And you can see in here a couple different ways that it refers to for example, mouse 1, control ID 1, control name mouse 1, control V key name, and so there's 3 different ways that it's specifying that this is mouse 1. Control ID, we don't know from this information whether that could change later on, but control name is probably going to stay the same. It's always going to refer to that mouse button. So we're going to plan to use the control name mouse 1 and mouse 2 to handle left and right click. And then if we look hard enough, we can find position changes each time. So a click was true, and then a release is false, and then the right click true, and then false. So that shows you what fields are available from the context of this event. So you can access any of that data. So that was this here. So we want hotkeys to toggle when it's mouse 1 and only when we release the button. So not we don't want it to turn on when we press and off when we release. We want it to only happen when we release the button. And then we'll do the same for broadcasting if it's mouse 2. So this is fairly simple programming. So we're going to use an if statement to ignore the button presses. So that way we can only take action on the release. And a switch statement, which will determine different things to do based on the button. So let's start with the if. This is an early X condition, which means we can stop doing anything at all if the position is true. In order to do that, we want to access the position from context.args, which was shown in this example here. Context.args showed all of the JSON object here. So the way it shows to do that is with brackets and then the name of the field. So what an if statement does in LavishScript, it tests if our condition is non-zero. So with true and false, true is non-zero and false is 0. So it works perfectly with if and can be placed directly into it. Let's paste this code. It says place it directly under the echo line. So here's our if, already written for us, but we can use this information to write similar code if we wanted to. So this here is it's called a data sequence, and here's an object, and here's a value that's part of it, and then this is a indexed value. So it's just ways that LavishScript provides to access different objects and their data. But here's a example for you to copy and paste for now. So here we access position from context.args, and we return from the method if it is true. So if the position is pressed, we return. And then we want to build a switch statement, and this will be using the control name, which was mouse 1 and mouse 2. It'll use control name from context.args. A switch will have multiple case lines, and LavishScript will match what's in the switch line against each of the case lines. So if control name is mouse 1, we want to toggle hotkeys. If control name is mouse 2, we want to toggle broadcasting. So each case then needs a break line, which has execution of the method leave the switch instead of doing the next case below it. So that's a kind of a common feature of switches. So here's what the final code looks like. It's going to have a switch, and it has these lines of code that were not described here, but these are used to toggle the master hotkey state and the master broadcasting state, and again those will be in the ISBoxer 2 wiki, but for now that information is right here in the guide. So we can type this in manually. We'll have a little comment. So this code only executes when it's released. The button is released. We'll make a switch, and we can start typing in basically what we see in the guide. So a switch needs the curly brace code block here, and then we start adding cases. So in LavishScript, you do not put a colon at the end of the line. That does not make it a valid case in LavishScript. So if you're coming from a different language, that's something to take note of. So exactly this text here is going to be compared with the result of that there, and if it matches, then this particular code is going to execute. So here it shows that for toggling hotkeys, which we want to happen when we use mouse 1, this is the magic code, and for broadcasting, this is the magic code. So this executes a method of the ISBoxer 2 object called ToggleMasterHotkeyToggle, and this one does ToggleMasterBroadcastingToggle. So those do basically what they say. It looks like it says, hey, ISBoxer 2, toggle this, and same for there, and that's exactly what we're going to do at that point. So that completes the changes. That's all we need to do for the clicks. So looking at this, we can see that it's going to produce some output still in the in-game interspace console. It's going to stop doing anything if the position is pressed. So anytime it's released, it's going to come down here and say, is that mouse 1? Okay, let's toggle the hotkey. Is that mouse 2? Okay, let's toggle the master broadcasting toggle. And then we can give that a test in the game. So we'll save that, load up ISBoxer 2, launch my DX nothing only team, and here we go. So there's that, and now I can click on either one of these and everything changes together. So that's the magic of modules and where things are going with ISBoxer 2, and we will worry about the rest later. So the look of this can be finished off. It says we can add transparency for the background brush and 0 for border thickness for the window element, and then when we toggle off the title bar, it's not going to have this border around it still, and we'll see what's behind the button instead of it being opaque basically because the window. So I can do that real quick in the package file here. The window is what we want to set. The background brush is going to be transparent. So the way to do that, the color is all zeros. And again, this color has 4 numbers because we're providing the alpha, so this is going to be transparent. Likewise, you can do this as an object, as I briefly explained earlier, and put in alpha 0. So that's how you can do that. We'll put it back to all zeros in an array. Woo. And then also the border brush. I'm sorry, we're going to change the border thickness, not the brush. Set that to 0. Border thickness, you can set the thickness on each side, so left, right, top, or left, top, right, bottom, or we can just set it to 0 all around. And again, that's in the documentation. So let's check that out real quick. Launch it again with that change. And now you can see that. You can see through our button. You can see the other toggles menu behind it. And so it's no longer got the solid background, and it no longer has a border around it. So that completes the look for our image there. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.